Reviewed them once and I'll review them again. It's time for Rule of 3 follow-ups, where the projects I found interesting before get a second look. Welcome back to Rule of 3 follow-ups with the second half of a two-part special look at IDW's Sonic the Hedgehog comic. I found the Metal Virus storyline to be pretty great with a lot of emotional depth and interesting use of characters, but felt the rushed conclusion wasted opportunities for a small storyline and character arc, the latter of which featuring an egregious mishandling of one of the characters. Much like the first storyline, it was good but not without some sour notes that's kinda giving me the feeling of getting my hopes up only to leave thinking things could have been a fair bit better. But with the third storyline, we enter a new era with a new head writer at the helm. And again, for the sake of transparency, I do have a line of contact with someone who worked on these comics, so please keep that in mind. Will IDW Sonic finally iron out those kinks and reach its full potential? Here are my thoughts. Starting off with the extra materials such as the two miniseries that took place during this arc, as well as the 2022 Free Comic Book Day, 2022 Annual and 5th Anniversary issues. When it comes to the Free Comic Book Day issue, Deep Trouble was inoffensive. Nothing bad, but nothing great. I feel like it would have been better if the whole book were dedicated to it because Prelude to Disaster was fine as extra material but could easily be skipped. Moving on to the 2022 Annual, Blaze's story was pretty nice, but I am not a fan of them writing that her world is put at peace. They've essentially made it so that nothing interesting can happen in the Soul Dimension anymore, which I think is a shame because there is a lot of potential there. It also cuts down on how much they can do with Blaze herself. It just doesn't make sense to me. I liked Espio and Silver buddying up in their story and question how Cream didn't immediately see through Orbot and Cubot's bullshit in theirs. Everything else was just okay. Then we have the 5th Anniversary Edition. I have the same feelings about Familiar Territory that I did with Deep Trouble, with the exception that it would have been nice to see a conclusive ending, especially since they reference it later. Reprinting the first issue and it just kinda wasted the space they could have given to this original story. It did also have a nice collection of art at the end, so that's fun. For bad guys, Dr. Starline didn't have a great plan, Eggman even calling it sloppy, with his haphazardness making him out to look like an idiot, which is something that persists in the main comic, but I'll get to that. Zavok and Mimic didn't come out much better either. While they take advantage of Starline's stupidity, it bites them in the ass when they fail to make sure he can't use the Tricore despite knowing he has it on him and what it's capable of. Eggman also doesn't appear to have the brightest bulb in the room, dismissing the idea at first of Sonic attacking him and then later believing it's Sonic attacking him for some reason. Not a terribly great few issues. Imposter Syndrome was better, but still not great with really inconsistent writing. Dr. Starline has said multiple times by then that he can only count on himself, so why is his big plan to rely on free will capable creatures, one of whom is psycho and can easily kick his ass? Surprise, surprise, he gets betrayed once again. There's also the issue of Belle having any information on Surge and Kid in her programming, unless if Starline had stupidly put it there himself. Then that info should have been lost on her when he uploaded it to his servers and destroyed the computer he used to get into her systems. It becomes a non-factor in the overall storyline when there's no mention of Belle having the info, so Starline bringing it up and the whole part of them trying to break into Tails' workshop was entirely pointless. That being said, the miniseries did a great job giving Surge and Kit believable motivations to strike out on their own, even if their creation raises questions, and their plan to get rid of everyone is solid. For the main comic, I have the same feelings as last time on the art overall, so I won't get into it here. We have some new characters, and I wasn't really wowed by any of their designs. The only one I have strong feelings on is Belle, and I dislike hers. Just not into the marionette aesthetic. For characterization, I thought Clutch made for a good bastard of a minor villain, serving the role much better than Rough and Tumble. Surge and Kit surprised the hell out of me, with the former being a really well-done psychotic evil counterpart to Sonic and the latter playing off of her well, while also having some of his own stuff to contribute. They both have unique powers we haven't seen much in the franchise, and again I think their backstories and motivation are really interesting. Lanolin is just kind of a boring military type that doesn't contribute anything for the time we see her, despite some of the dramatic shots they give her implying that there's going to be something more to the character. She didn't even get named from the time she first spoke to the end of the storyline. From all I see, it would have probably been better to keep her as she was before, a standout background character that changes outfits every time we see her. I'm not a fan of Belle. Personality-wise she's fine, but her backstory makes absolutely no sense. If she was so important to Mr. Tinker and the villagers, why didn't the heroes meet her before? Eggman as Tinker didn't make any mentions of assistance or anything, and she's not in Windmill Village when Sonic and Tails went back there at the start of the Metal Virus saga. It just feels so tacked on. Consider what I said in the review of the Neo Metal arc about keeping Eggman amnesiac for a little while. I think a more interesting angle would have been if an advanced robot such as Belle were looking for Eggman as opposed to Mr. Tinker. It makes sense since Eggman has a bunch of bases all around the world with plenty of robots in them. With the way it is, all the emotional dialogue about how close they were just lacks impact because things don't match up. Just about the only thing that does make sense is her helping out Tails in his workshop, since it's good to have a character with a full understanding of Eggman's technology. To that end, I'm also gonna apologize for the sucky OC Pals comment I made for the sake of a joke in the extras video of my Sonic CD Let's Play, because I ended up really liking Jewel, and even if I don't like Bell or Tangle, there's at least some role that they fill in the comics. Let's move on to Dr. Starline, who is a terribly written villain in my opinion. His whole thing is proving himself to be superior to Eggman, but has no true victories to back it up and plant the seed in the mind of the reader that maybe he really is better. Each and every plan he had, the people he was working for had him played for a fool and betrayed him, and the only times he does succeed is out of luck rather than his wits, like the Deadly Six raiding the Restoration's headquarters or Surgeon Kit letting him think he's won by taking over Eggman's tech. I could never buy him as a threat because of that, and if he's killed off for real, then good fucking riddance. When it comes to the game characters, I think they were depicted well enough, but there are some criticisms I have, such as Amy's confidence arc being suddenly cut off. Multiple issues in the last arc were building it up, and then it's just kinda unceremoniously over after she hypes herself up in one fight like Evan just wanted to be rid of it. I think winning or losing the clutch by the narrowest of margins and feeling weakened afterward, rocking her confidence in battle, keeping it going through the testing chambers and concluding it with the camping story would have been better. Instead, it's just kinda transferred into an even shorter arc for Jewel, where it also unceremoniously ends with a sudden pep talk from Amy which, as sweetly as it was worded, did come right after she publicly pressured Jewel, whose anxiety is one of her defining characteristics, into making up a plan on the fly. So that whole thing just kind of feels like a waste. At least it's shown that there was a proper transition of leadership in the Restoration, even if it makes that one scene from issue 32 stick out like a sore thumb. Sonic attacking Belle at first, even though it's clear she's non-aggressive and not a traditional badnik, makes him look short-sighted, even by his standards. Being so untrusting and almost dismissing her afterward seemed oddly cold of him, too. On the flip side, I remember when issue 50 came out and fans complained about Sonic being too preachy and wordy, which I disagree with. I can see why they might think that, seeing as how in games like Unleashed or Black Knight, he was capable of making statements just as meaningful but in much fewer words, but I don't think lengthening these statements is a bad thing or un-Sonic of him. The only time it felt inappropriate given the circumstances was when he scolded Metal Sonic at the end of the Metal Virus arc, so it's hardly a consistent issue. When it comes to the story, we've got a mixed bag. Aside from what I stated earlier, the Chow races were pretty good and I loved the idea of Eggman having a virtual testing space for his machines and Sonic, Tails, and Amy getting stuck there. It's a cool idea that makes a lot of sense. The Deadly Six takeover plot was an absolute slog to get through though, and it mainly rests on how stupid the Restoration is with a lack of security, despite that very thing fucking them over during the last storyline. Why do they have an easily exploitable mechanism in their supposedly super secret entrance? And why doesn't it have any surveillance system at that? I groaned at the idea of the Restoration HQ being basically unguarded. This is the most important place to protect for the good guys. It has all of their info and supplies, and Eggman once controlled 99.99% of the fucking world. How could they rest on their laurels and not be prepared for the possibility of something like that happening again? The explanation they give makes no sense either. The idea that there are no petty or violent low-level criminals roaming around is unbelievably dumb. And then how in all of everything good and holy are there people in the Restoration that don't know who Dr. Starline is? God damn. The camping storyline went well enough aside from what I mentioned earlier, as well as Tangle quitting and then immediately deciding not to quit the Restoration. While I suppose that's not out of character for her, it does feel weird. I mentioned last time that it feels like the writers have a problem with actually committing the long-term storytelling in this, as well as Amy and Jules' instantly resolved internal troubles, are good examples of that. I quite liked the lead up to the 50th issue, especially the chaotic story, even if the whole letter from Mr. Tinker thing was kinda contrived. Dumber things have happened in the Sonic franchise, so it's whatever. Issue 50 in itself I thought was a pretty enjoyable read. I liked seeing Eggman give Starline what he deserved for being such a disgrace, Sonic and Surge's fight was action-packed and had good dialogue, and what I thought was best was the fight between Tails and Kit. Not only was the script even better than the bits with Sonic and Surge, but Tails' plan to try and work together with Kit was so goddamn genius, even if it didn't work out, and he made up for it afterward with some quick thinking too. Kit, for his part, came off so believably sympathetic. Very masterfully written. The one problem I did have with it was that the cliffhanger ending to this arc felt much the same way that all the post-plot fighting did in the Metal Virus saga's conclusion, with a sort of fatigue factor. Eggman wants to send his robots after Sonic, Tails, and Belle despite the fact that his base is heavily damaged, and he even said that he wasn't ready to launch an attack, so why? It could have just as easily been Eggman letting them go with the threat that he'll be back, the damage caused to his robots from the constant reprogramming necessitating an entire Eggnet reboot or something. So the story as a whole was pretty mid, but I do want to compliment the personable dialogue between the characters, which I thought was really good most of the time and felt genuine. Still some grammatical issues though, but I think they got sharper noticing that as time went on. There was a point they increased the page count for the stories per issue by getting rid of the previews for other comics, and I'm of two minds about that. When I like the stories, I don't even notice and it still feels very digestible. When I don't like them, they feel a lot longer. Okay, so with all of that said, do I feel like continuing? Well, I kinda have to for the sake of my upcoming character analysis video on Amy, but if I weren't obligated, I think the answer would just be a maybe. There's stuff in here that I really liked, but the storytelling has been getting gradually worse with each arc, and given what I've seen, I can't be too hopeful that it'll turn around. There's potential there, loads of it. However, it's a brass ring that they've gotten a feel for but haven't quite been able to grab. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I can give some updates on Twitter going over what I feel about the 4th arc. For now, I hope you've enjoyed these 2 Rule of 3 follow-up specials. I have been Skull902, thank you for watching and have yourselves a wonderful day.